the local authorities were turning to China to revive the economy. In 2018, cruise ships like the World Dream made 19 layovers at Subic, many of them filled with newly prosperous mainland Chinese tourists. Wilma T. Asma, chairperson of the Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority, described them as a game-changer for the area, at least until the coronavirus pandemic of 2020, which brought the global cruise industry to a shuddering halt. It wasn't just Subic Bay that was looking to China. A Chinese firm had recently announced plans to invest $2 billion in an industrial park at the former Clark Air Base, while Chinese state banks had plans to fund a railway connecting the two former bases under the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, President Xi Jinping's globe-spanning infrastructure scheme. At the same time, two more Chinese companies were angling to take over a failing South Korean shipyard at Subic Bay, a worrisome prospect for the U.S. government, given its close proximity to the hotly disputed South China Sea. The arrival of Chinese economic power in these former nerve centers of the American military reflected a deeper shift in the balance of power in Southeast Asia. While the closure of Subic and Clark did not result in a wholesale American withdrawal from the region, the U.S. Navy shifted its ship maintenance yards and supply depots to other Asian countries, including Japan and Singapore. It did mark an important watershed. The base closures represented the largest reduction of American forces in the Western Pacific up to that point. For the first time in 4 centuries, there were no foreign troops in the Philippines. A strategic vacuum yawned, and the Chinese stood ready to fill it. In February 1992, 9 months before the U.S. flag was lowered at Alava Wharf, China's legislature passed a bill laying claim to more than 80% of the South China Sea, the Asian seaway that serves as a major conduit of global trade. The innocuously titled Law Concerning Territorial Waters and Adjacent Regions marked the beginning of China's increasingly muscular attempts to extend its control over the important ocean expanse. That same month, China's paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, wound up what would later become known as his Southern Tour, which revived China's economic reforms following its violent crackdown on pro-democracy protests in 1989. At the time of Deng's tour, few American observers thought China likely to emerge as a viable economic competitor in the foreseeable future. In 1992, the nation's per capita GDP sat at just $366, and its exports amounted to less than $85 billion. But 25 years later, its per capita GDP had grown more than 20-fold. The value of its exports had increased 26 times over. In 2013, China surpassed the U.S. to become the world's top trading nation, and the following year overtook the U.S. to become the world's largest economy, at least in terms of purchasing power parity. This booming economic emergence has fueled a crash program of defense modernization that poses the most serious challenge to U.S. military supremacy in the Pacific since the end of World War II. Nowhere is China's economic and military emergence more apparent than in Southeast Asia, the dynamic and diverse region straddling the critical intersection of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Since the end of the Cold War, China has risen from a mid-table power in Southeast Asia to an economic, military, and even cultural force in the 11 nations of the region: Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Burma, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, East Timor, and the Philippines. Today, China is Southeast Asia's top trade partner and source of tourism and contributes a rapidly growing proportion of its foreign direct investment. From the Mekong River to the South China Sea, China's power is rapidly reshaping the region. I first started following this story from Cambodia, where I lived and worked from 2008 to 2016, covering Southeast Asia from the country's dilapidated capital, Phnom Penh. This small, conflict-torn country offered a unique angle on the changes that had taken place since the end of the Cold War. In March 1992, as the U.S. Navy was leaving Subic Bay, the United Nations, UN, was arriving in Cambodia, part of a $2 billion multinational peacekeeping mission intended to end a long civil war and rebuild the country as a liberal democracy. If Subic Bay symbolized the passing era of the Cold War, Cambodia symbolized the promise of what was to come, a world finally made safe for democracy. With the arrival of the UN's democracy